Okay, happy Mother's Day, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of the Faith in a World of Turmoil series from Nishmat. Today, we are privileged to hear from Rav Avi Blidstein, who was born in America and made Aliyah in 1972. He studied Torah under his father, Rabbi Professor Yaakov Blidstein, a Talmid Muvchak of Rev Soloveitchik. Rav Avi later studied at Yeshivat Har Etzion under Rav Aaron Lichtenstein and Rav Amital. He then studied under Rav Dov Zinger in in Yeshivat Mekor Chaim. He married Ilana. They had 3 daughters together and founded a community in Yerushalayim. Rav Avi taught in Yeshivat Har Eretz HaTzvi, and sadly, Ilana became sick and later passed away from cancer. Rav Avi relocated his family to Petach Tikva to teach in the yeshiva of Rav Yuval Shurlo, and he then remarried Orit. Together, they have an additional 5 children, Baruch Hashem. And he was then chosen to be the Rav of Yeshuv Tekoa. Today, he is the head of Nishmat's advanced program for students in their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and etc. years who can't get enough of Torah study and choose to stay with us. So we're very privileged to hear from Rav Avi today.
Thank you. Okay, where do I start from? First of all, I would like to say that it's moving for me to speak to you overseas at this time, when I feel that that here in Israel we feel that we're starting to get out of the corona, whatever we call it, the situation we're in right now. Things are getting better, and I think that in Jewish communities over the world, things are not yet getting better so fast. And I just want to say that we think a lot about you, and we care, and that's there. We have that. It's both caring and worrying for what's happening in with all of you, wherever you are. That's before I start. Okay, the topic that I chose to speak about is based on the pasuk, Ki eshev b'choshech Hashem or li. As I sit in the darkness, in the dark, Hashem is my light, my illumination, and recovery after loss as a religious experience. Now, this won't be a shir. It's not a class. I have no source sheet. It's more personal stories about a loss that I suffered, me and my family, and to an extent we recovered in a sense, and I hope, if lucky, maybe some insights that I gained or that can be gained by through these stories. Some of it could be relevant to what's happening to the situation today, when many people are suffering loss or afraid of that. The fear of that is in the air. So, but it's mostly a personal story, basically. It's the first time I'm telling the story, I think, in English, and certainly remote, without knowing the people that I'm telling my story to. But I'll try, and I hope it does some good. First of all, I'll try to give some sort of a timeline, so you'll know where I'm coming from, and then I'll give like anecdotes from the story that we went through, and what I think we can, I personally take from each of them. So I was married to Ilana. We had 3 daughters, wonderful daughters, and we loved each other deeply. And when she was 32, and I was a year older than her, she was diagnosed with cancer. We went through treatments, 2 years of treatments, and then we hoped to work after it. But then maybe a year and a half later, it turned out that she still had cancer, and so we were still with that in our lives. And some 5 years later, she passed away. When she was first diagnosed, our daughters were 3, 5, and 7 years old. And when she passed away 8 years later, so they were 11, 13, and 15. And I was left in the world, myself and my daughters. And without her, that was, which was really tough. Thank God, less than a year later, I met Orit, and we married. It's her first marriage. And since then, we've had 5 children. So altogether, we're 8 children. We have 8 children in the family. And in a sense, we grew up, we grew back to be a family. And as Julie said before, we now live in Tekoa. I teach in Nishmat. So that's basically what we were through. We were through 8 years of sickness, of the treatments, of hope, and then despair. And then finally, Ilana passed away. And getting up from that somehow, over the years, being able to get up from that low point. Okay, now on that timeline, I would like to give over a few anecdotes which have to do with a few different insights, which I would like to give over to you. I'll start with I think the lightest one is my wife's wonderful sense of humor, which went along the whole way with us. I'll give a few examples, which and I think even and after she passed away, it also the sense of humor was still with us. I'll give a few examples that, for example, when the cancer came back again, so one of the things that she did, she had someone who came and did massages, someone who to help her through the pain, and he would come. We lived on a fourth floor building in Yerushalayim, no elevator. So, and he would come up. He was heavy. He was a heavy man, and he would come up these stairs, and he would come in the door, and then he would walk into her room, and then he would stand at the entrance to the room. She was lying in bed, and then he would give this groan. He would go, "Oh!" It was sort of like he was summing up those flights of stairs that he went up, and then meeting her, and he would give that groan, and then he would walk into the room and start treating her. And she would imitate that. And that was the funniest thing. Like we would, whenever we would get into our car to drive somewhere, so all of us, we would all get in before she came down because it took her more time to come down. So we would all get in and wait for her in the car. And then she would get into the car and lower herself into the seat and give that groan. We all knew it by heart. And she would give that groan. And then the whole family, we would all groan also together. Oh! And then we'd burst out laughing, and we would start driving. So that's an example of how she took. She found those things in the story that we went through, and she knew how to make fun of them and to laugh a bit. At the end of these 8 years, like the last period, so we had like a month when she was still alive, and the doctor called to say, at a certain point, he called to say, things are deteriorating faster than I thought. You don't have much time. So I asked him, how much time do you think we have? So he said, a week. Okay. So he said a week. So that was very dramatic when that happened. I'll get back to that story in a moment. But after he said we have a week, it took a month. So we had 3 additional weeks, like, to live through. So after the week was up, and she went on living, so she would say, there's the terminology in Hebrew is when you buy milk and it has a date written on it, there's an expiry date, right? Pag tokef, the date expired. So she would call herself, after that week was up, she would look at herself and she would say, expiry date, like I'm Pag tokef, the date is over already. That's the way she looked at herself. And the last, I think the last bit of humor that I remember from her was the night before, like it was a day and a half before she passed away. And our eldest daughter, she like during those last weeks, she was 15 already. And she realized she didn't have much more mommy time. So she would come over to her whenever she had time, like simply to talk to her, to learn from her, to speak to her, to fill in whatever she could for the next years. Big questions, small questions. And so that last night like a day and a half before she passed away. So my daughter was with her like till 11 at night, talking to her. And then my wife was exhausted. Ilana was exhausted. So she told her, she said, I really have to sleep now, but come back at 2 in the morning, because she didn't sleep very well. And my daughter said, yeah, she'll be back at 2 in the morning to go on with the conversation. And then my daughter didn't wake up 2 in the morning. So the next morning, which was like the morning before my wife passed away, so she woke up and she ran to her room, and my wife looked at her. My wife couldn't speak almost, but my wife looked at her and said, like this, like 2 in the morning, where were you? I was waiting for you. So she knew how to make, she had that sense of humor to make a joke out of anything. And that is something which we went with. And I feel that for me, that is part, like, since the topic is as a religious experience, I think that was a religious experience for us, being able to look at these things which many people look at as so heavy and sad, and something which you can't, there's no way to make it to make it lighter. And she was able to fill it with light and with humor and with and I felt there was something divine about that ability. Okay, so that's the first thing I would say, her sense of humor. Now, maybe I'll skip back deeper in to something slightly different, which is the ability to look at things straight in the eye, to look at the cancer, at the disease, at the loss which we're about to experience straight in the eye. The frankness, the openness that she taught us. And I'll try it again through a few anecdotes to show you, to show how that happened and how it worked to help us. Okay, so the first thing is the way we chose to tell our children. As I said before, our children were, when she was diagnosed for cancer, so our children were 3, 5, and 7 years old. They were really kids. And okay, it takes a while until we realize exactly what it is. But then once we know and we're about to tell people in the family, so it was clear to us that the first people to tell are the children. And from day one, we were fully open with them, and we shared with them what we knew. Obviously, we translated into a language that they could understand, and we didn't go into any technicalities or whatever. But they knew from the beginning that we can speak about this openly, and so we simply we took them together, and we told them. Now, I don't know what it meant for them at the time, but we were there to answer their questions, and I think they realized from the reactions of people around us that it was rather dramatic, and it was with them. And from that day, from day one on, somehow the shadow was with us as part of our life through those 8 years. It was there. But then again, with a sense of humor. So, okay, every year there's Pesach, there's the Seder, there's Chad Gadya. What do we meet? Who do we meet in Chad Gadya towards the end? Malach HaMavet, right? Malach HaMavet comes to kill the Shochet, right? So we meet him every year. So what do we do every year? He's with us. We know him. He's in our home. So every year we reach Malach HaMavet and we go, ooh. That's what we do. So we were able to make, even though it was there for us, we were able to play around with it with the kids at the same time. So she had that ability to look things straight in the eye without lowering her eyes, and so that was very special. Now I'll skip forward to that day when the doctor called me to tell me that we have only 1 week maybe to live, and he happened to tell it to me when at the same time her parents, Saba and Safta, my in-laws, were with us for dinner. We were at home. It was just us and the kids and the 2 of them, Saba and Safta, and we were having supper together. And then I get this phone call. So I go out to the porch and the doctor tells me we have only another week. So obviously the first people to tell were our children. We had to tell them before we told anyone else. We couldn't tell it to them with Saba and Safta at home. So we decided. I went with Ilana to a side room, and I told her straight in the eye. I told her the news that the doctor had just given me, and we both said, "Okay, so we have to tell Saba and Safta to go home." We couldn't tell them why. I think that was the most. I don't think I ever did anything so impolite in my life. So it was the middle of supper, and I simply go up to Saba and Safta and I tell them, "You have to go now." Wow. Okay. But they understood something is happening, and they left. And then we got the kids together, and we told them. There's no way getting around it. It's very, very painful. But then you see, one of my daughters she felt free enough to ask me, like, that was a Sunday, to ask me, when he says a week, does it include Shabbos or not? So that was very touching. But I'm happy we were open enough that she was able to ask that. I'll give another example of the openness or the frankness. My wife, I would say in preparation for death, she met many people. She seeked their wisdom or their insights into how to prepare for death. And in one of these conversations with a Rosh Yeshiva, of Dafka, a Kabbalist in Yerushalayim, Yeshivat Mekubalim in Yerushalayim. So she asked him whether is it okay for her to, in davening, when she davens and praying, is it okay for her to say to Hashem, to say to God that she's angry with him? So this Rosh Yeshiva looked at her and said, "Do you believe in God?" So she said, "Yes." "Do you believe God is all-knowing? He knows everything?" So she said, "Yes." And then he said, "And deep in your heart, are you angry with him?" So she said, "Yes." So he said, "So why not tell him?" That is what he said. I think that's an answer she could only get by virtue of being so frank and so sincere. And she really had a very deep and open relationship with God, and she was able to tell him, to say what she really felt. Okay, that moves me on to another insight or another sort of issue that comes with this, and that is prayer, tefillah. So there are two things that I remember that stand out from my mind in terms of tefillah. One has to do with tefillah, and it also has to do with hope. Okay, so I'll say something first about tefillah. We prayed all the time. And we were always all through the whole period, the whole of the 8 years, we were optimistic, and we we always hoped for the good. But then when this telephone from the doctor came, and he said we have only one more week to live, so we consciously decided to change our state of mind and to put our energies into something different, into preparing for death. And I would say in my wife's words, she said, if Hashem is inviting me, if he's calling me to come, so I'm going. And so then things changed for us. We were no longer, I personally, my wife, we were no longer praying for to outlive or to be cured from the cancer. That was our decision, and she put all of her energy during that month into departure, leaving this world in peace. She invited both from me, from the children, family, friends, the world. So davening changed for us. Now at that point of time, both of us, my wife and I, we were leading a community in Yerushalayim. There was a Kehillah community in Yerushalayim that we both started up and we established, and it was a very special place for us. And it was a co-leadership. We were doing it together. And this Kehillah was very much surrounded us during the last year and a half of the sickness. And then during this last month, which started as a week, as I said before, so some of the leaders of the community came to me as the rabbi of the community to ask me, what do I think the community should be doing? Should they be praying for us, for my wife, for health? So I had to make a decision, like what if what we're going through can I pass over to other people? Maybe this is something which only we who are so deep, we're so close to the story itself, we can experience it that way and say that we're putting aside one type of hope and we're moving on to something different. But the community, they're in a different place. They're in a different state of mind. So I remember what I told him two things. I told him, first of all, people should pray for whatever they want. Let the community go on praying the way they feel is right. Basically, you know the facts just as well as we know them, and you can pray the way you want to. And the other thing I told him is liyot b'simcha, to be not to let the prayer and the situation and to bring people into a state of either being depressed or being liyot b'simcha, l'harbot b'simcha, to be as I didn't have a good word in English to translate this type of simcha that I'm talking about into. And I hope something of that went over to the Kehillah. And okay, so this is one insight that I have into tefillah. The tefillah is could be very different for different people at the same time, and hope can be, there are a lot of different types of hope. And okay, the other tefillah that I remember, and I'll try to share with you, goes way back to the beginning of the diagnosis of the cancer. We were living at the time in Yerucham, far south in Israel, in the desert. And I remember we went for whatever all treatments we had to do were in Beersheba. And I remember that after the first shock, the initial shock of the diagnosis, so immediately we began building up our hopes. Like you're at the same time you receive the blow, and then moments after that you begin building up your hope. And people, I really can't live without a bit of hope. you need some hope. Like if your boat can be shattered into pieces and you're thrown into the sea, and you find a broken log and you hold on to that, and that becomes your hope. We can't function without that. So it's always there. And yes, so immediately after we were diagnosed, and we didn't know exactly what the plan was, but immediately we began hoping, maybe it will only be this, only be that. And then I remember after that first step of holding on to some sort of a hope, then my wife went through surgery, and after the surgery we had a more precise information, and we realized that things are worse than we thought they were. And I remember there was like some sort of a number, like we hoped for a certain number, and then it was worse, whatever it was. And I remember coming back from Beersheba to Yerucham. I remember the drive back with my wife, and I remember myself sinking into despair. Like I had this hope that I had held on to, and like it worked for me like for 2 weeks, and now someone came and shattered that hope. That was more shocking than the cancer itself. And I remember I simply I was unable to function. I let my wife off with the kids, with a friend, I don't remember what. And I went out into the desert. I walked out into the desert, and I sat down on a stone somewhere where no one could see me. I didn't even cry. But I turned to Hashem and I said, there's no way I can get up from the stone now. I simply sunk the deepest I could. Those were my words to Hashem. And I don't know how. Somehow I was able to get up from that rock and walk back home. That's not what I'm giving over now. It doesn't give any advice or insight. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to share with you the different religious experiences that I had around this Masa, this journey that we went through, and that was one of them. Being able to say to give over to Hashem my full feeling of simply of despair. Okay, something more of hope. We have. I want to tell you one more story of hope, and then maybe something about fear. So I'm jumping again forward to the last month of life that we had together. Something very special happened to us during that last month. We that day or that evening when we were told about the full situation, and so first we kept it to ourselves, to the family. I think the next day, if I'm not mistaken, so people in the community and Talmidim, students of ours, began to hear about it. And the next night, wait a moment, I'll tell another thing, is that on that day, my eldest daughter told my wife, she said to her, the saddest thing will be that, for me, will be that you won't be with me on my wedding. When I'll get married, you won't be with me there. So my wife said to her, I'll be with you. I promise you I'll be with you. So my daughter said, yes, but I want you to really be there. So my wife said, yes, I will really be there. But that wasn't good enough for my daughter. She was 15 years old at the time. And then that evening, the evening after we heard about how the situation was, so that evening, we have a knock on the door, and a group of Hasidim, of Breslover Hasidim, walk in with musical instruments. Who are you? Who are they? Who are they? Okay, so their leader, one of them, I look at closely. Their leader is an ex-Talmid of mine. It was a Talmid of mine years before. Am I back on? If anyone hears me, if you can give me a signal so I know that you hear me. Okay, thank you, Julie. So this group of Breslover Chassidim come in, and this Talmud of mine, he says he's a Talmud. He's also really he's a distant mishpacha of mine. Okay, so we were pretty close. And he said he heard from friends, whatever, he heard the situation, and they have this group that they come and they play music for sick people wherever. So he got his friends together, and they came to the Sameach, we should have a good nigun at home. Okay, is it okay if they come in? So I said, sure, you can come in. So they came in and they started playing, and obviously it's all b'simcha. It wasn't a slow nigunim of despair. It was very, very joyous nigunim, and that really uplifted all of us. That was wonderful. And I'll just, before I go on with this chapter of the story, through the whole month till she died, this group of Breslover, they were with us, and they came every few days. They came to play at home, and many people came in to our home together with them to dance and sing, and it was a celebration of life and death and being about to meet Hashem. That was very special. But finally, at the Levaya, they also, after the Levaya was over, they stayed at the grave, and they also went on playing their instruments and doing music on her grave. In any case, I'm going back to that evening. So they came in, and they started playing their instruments. So they play, and my wife is in bed, in the bedroom, and family are there, a few cousins and my daughters. So, and then at a certain point, my wife told them if they could do the nigun of leading the kala to the chuppah, a wedding nigun of a wedding. So they did. They played the nigunim of a chuppah, of a wedding, and my wife told me to hold my daughter's hand, and she held her other hand, and we walked her to the chuppah. And then my daughter said, that evening, she told my wife, now I know that you'll really be there. So that was very special. Thank God she got married since. And we have 2 grandsons, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so that is something about hope, and that hope is like, for me, having some sort of a hope is like breathing. Like you can't live without. I can't live today on the oxygen that I took in yesterday. I have to breathe now in order to live. So we need some sort of a hope now. We've got to find it somewhere. Okay, there's a lot more to tell there, but I'll choose maybe 2 more points. One has to do with free choice, with bechira chofshit. That is something that I think my wife was very, very special in any situation, looking for what free choice does she have in the situation, not letting the context, not letting limitations surrounding her in her life to take away the fact, the experience, the feeling of having some sort of a free choice regarding the situation. And I remember, like, those last weeks when slowly her choices were getting narrower and narrower, and she had less and less free choice. But she still had the choice to smile if she wanted to lift a finger if she wanted to. She had that free choice, and she celebrated it. In other words, she told the people around. She said, I can spend all my life bewailing all of these things that limit my free choice, but that is boring. That's not interesting. What's really interesting is to find the what choice still remains for me, and realizing that choice that I have. That is what makes life worthwhile living. And when no choice will remain, I probably won't be living anymore. So that was her. I think it was one of her motto. That was the motto she went with. Searching for that and concentrating on that, and I think that filled her and us, all of us, with some sort of hope. There's hope. There's hope for something because you can choose between options, and that was always there. Okay, free choice, and maybe one more. One more point is something about fear. Fear. Oh, wow. I have a lot to say about fear, but I have to choose. I said free choice before. So, okay, I'll choose two things. The first thing is the following. When very soon after we found out that we had very few days of life together, so we chose to spend all of these days till she died at home, not to be hospitalized. And my wife, in fact, passed away at home. And we had nurses, some sort of a home caretakers that helped us go through that phase. And I remember I think it was the first meeting with them, that my wife was obviously terribly scared of death. And I remember that there was either a social worker or a nurse who sat down with us and said, okay, you're afraid of death, but what exactly about death are you afraid of? Can you break that down into pieces? And she did. She took that unnameable fear, unfathomable, infinite fear, and she was able to break it into pieces. And she found out that she was afraid of, partly of what would happen to us when we're left behind. She was afraid of the pain that would be painful, and she was afraid of the feeling. That's the way she imagined it, a feeling of choking. Those were her three fears. And once she broke it down into those three bits, she was able to deal with each of them individually. And suddenly that enormous, infinite thing, the fear of death, sort of dissolved, not into nothing, but it turned out that it was that hugeness of it was a mirage. It wasn't really that way. It was different. It was these three things that we have to work through. Okay, that was something for me to learn from her, from my wife, about fear. And the other fear I'll tell you about is a fear I had towards the beginning of those 8 years. As I said, we had three daughters, and they were, at the time, they were 3, 5, and 7 years old. And I had a dream. I remember I had a dream that I was walking in the street with, I think it was 2 of my daughters. And then they were walking alone. I wasn't with them, and they both fell. I could see them both falling in the street, and there was no one to pick them up. So okay, someone told me, and I think it took me a while to understand that obviously it was a dream about my fears of my wife not being there, and what would happen if something happens to me as well, and I'm not there for them. Who will then save them or take care of them, or whatever? And then a wise person told me. He said, you know, that is part of that many parents think that it's their responsibility and their ability to really take care of their children. But really, all you can do is you can do what we call hishtadlu. You can do your best. But really, who really takes care of our children? Hashem. Hashem is there to take care of them. Okay, I heard what he said. It didn't really calm me, but I went with that, with his words. And then it happened. I'll steal a couple of minutes if that's okay. And then it happened that we had to go to Yerushalayim for some sort of a treatment from Yerushalayim. So we found a babysitter for one kid and for another. But then one of the girls, one of the children, we had no, we didn't find any solution for, and we both had to be there in Yerushalayim. And then last minute, we remembered a friend in Yerushalayim who possibly could do this, could take care of one of the girls. So that morning, we came early in the morning from Yerucham all the way to Yerushalayim, and I knocked on the door of this friend, and my daughter doesn't know her at all, and we walk into the house, and this friend brings out pencils and the paper, and my daughter starts making a picture. And in my heart, I say, I said, there's no way I can leave her here without knowing that it's okay. And I felt like in that situation, like I have to go with my wife now. How can I leave my kid behind? Like, who will take care of her? And then my daughter was drawing on her paper, and this friend who was babysitting took another piece of paper and also began drawing. And then the friend joined the two pieces of paper until slowly I could see that their pencils were sort of communicating, like something had happened between them. It simply, poof, it was there, like that miracle. And I could feel like the hearts had opened on both sides, both my daughter and this friend, that it could work. I could leave her there securely. And then I left and we went to where we had to go. And I felt that was like Yad Hashem, like it was Hashem there showing me that it doesn't all depend on me, that there are other, like it's Hashem, his messengers in the world who are there to help us out. Okay, I have to stop to end now. I hope it wasn't too not in order and not in and I hope it did some good, these stories that I told. And at this time we should all remember hope and tefillah, and being frank and sincere about our fears, and realizing the choices that we have in a given situation. Bezrat Hashem, it should be refuah and simcha for the whole world.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rav Avi, for that very moving and very, very personal account of your own religious experience with loss. I want to invite everyone back next week for a more traditional Nishmat style shiur with sources with Rabbanit Gila Rosen, who will be discussing relationships between ourselves and with God in a world of turmoil, next week at 10 a.m. Thank you again, Rav Avi, and we hope to see you all back next week.